What's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today I thought I'd break down my KTM 790 Adventure R. I've had it for about 18 months and I gotta say, this is probably the best motorcycle I've ever owned. So I picked up my KTM 790 back at the end of February 2020, right before the pandemic hit here in Australia. So fortunately for me, when the whole world went into lockdown and we were only allowed to kind of play in our backyard, I found myself with kind of the perfect weapon to do that. Now I do have a background in motocross, so tweaking this bike to fit me was really suited around the way that I like to ride, which is a bit more of a kind of a motocross flow rather than coming at this bike from a hard enduro, slow technical background. So I kind of like a little bit more flow, and I ride with a technique more similar to a motocross rider than, an enduro rider. So I haven't put crazy amounts of kilometers on this bike, probably just over 12,000, 13,000 kilometers in the last 18 months. But I only really ride this bike on weekends, and probably about 80%, 90% of the kilometers on that bike are off-road. I only really ride this bike on-road to get to the beautiful off-road part of my adventure. So again, like most of the kilometers on this bike, have been in the dirt, which is kind of cool, and I guess not many adventure bikes could claim that. BMW GS. So we'll get the obvious question out of the way. Probably a bunch of you are going to be in the comments talking about KTM reliability. So let's just square away my experience. Apart from a couple of recalls that my bike was listed under, I have had no issues with this. And the parts that were on that recall, my bike clearly didn't suffer from them. So to be honest, I've had a pretty effortless ownership of this bike. The first major service interval is at 15,000 Ks. So it hasn't been in for a proper service yet. All the minor servicing I've done myself, and so far, again, no issues with the bike. Now, my dad also has the same bike. He bought one not long after me. Just recently, he has had a pretty major issue that's quite common on these bikes. His rear shock has blown its seals. So his bike has been taken into the shop this last week. It's gonna be there for 2 weeks. The rear shock will be sent to a specialist, have all the seals replaced, have the oils replaced, and be put back in the bike. So the dealer's done a great job in getting that sorted, but that has been one of the issues that we've experienced with the ownership of this bike. So the bike to ride is an absolute blast. To be honest, I haven't had more fun on a motorcycle than this one. And it's mainly for two reasons. One, of course, is the actual bike itself and a few of its key characteristics that make it so much fun to ride. And the second is really the kind of things that you can do and the places you can go on this bike. So we'll start with the first one. Some of those characteristics: the engine is fantastic. KTM are known for making kind of clunky sounding engines, but man, do they rip. And this engine for a 790 has so much pep and it's so much fun. When you put it into rally mode, this bike really wants to rip. And unlike other sport modes on other bikes, the throttle doesn't become twitchy and unenjoyable. Instead, it still has lots of control and feedback on the inputs, but the power is instantaneous and it's so much fun to rip on. Now, in that rally mode, you also have the fine-tuning adjustments of your traction control from a scale of 1 to 9, and you can dial that in as you're riding on the fly with the buttons on the handlebars. Now, I usually tend to ride off-road at about a 3, and I usually just leave it there. To be honest, I kind of really like it there. I can have the back end completely sideways. The traction control doesn't even start to come in, and it's only when I'm losing the bike does the traction control do anything. Usually that happens when I hit like a slick section of mud, or perhaps I hit into some soft sand that I wasn't expecting. If I'm going into some really deep sand, I'll pop that down to a traction setting of 1 or turn it off completely. And then if I'm riding any road in between the off-road sections and I can't be bothered exiting the rally mode, I'll just crank that traction control up to a 9. Of course, the suspension on this bike is class leading, and again, that makes it so much fun when riding off-road. Particularly for me, when I'm trying to ride with a bit more speed and have that motocross flow happening, it's really nice to be able to track over blind terrain with confidence. Now, obviously we all know that this bike shines off-road. KTM is unbeatable when it comes to, the off-road segment in the adventure class. But that means, of course, that this bike has to come with some downsides and some compromises, I would say. The biggest compromise, of course, is going to be on-road comfort. When you're trying to track long distance on the highway, the bike in stock form really struggles against the competition. And of course, that's done because it takes most of its weight down low with the fuel tanks, which is going to help with, rideability and performance, but you're going to lose some of that wind protection from a high fuel tank. We also don't have a full fairing on the front of this bike. Instead, we have these little plastic winglets. So this, of course, is going to allow a lot more wind to flow through, creating more buffeting and just more wind noise out on the highway. So that's the downside of the bike. There are a few modifications you can make to help combat this. Now, I've thrown a little wind spoiler on top of my windshield, and this is quick and easy to pop on and off. And I use this when I'm riding on the highways, and it actually removes so much wind noise, it's unbelievable. 30 bucks, and to be honest, I could now ride this bike for hours on end on the highway in comfort with very little wind noise. So speaking of little accessories and adjustments I've made to the bike, let's break down a few more things that I've done. In terms of power, I haven't really done much to the bike. I've added on the Yoshimura RS4 muffler. This initially was just for a little bit of sound and a little bit of style to the bike. It has a nice deep low rumble, which really is far more enjoyable than the sewing machine stock sound. But what I found when I popped this exhaust on was the power that the bike made became really smooth. I mean, like a lot smoother. Everything felt really silky on the throttle, particularly down low in the RPMs, but also in the mid-range as well. And I just feel that I have a lot more connection now from my inputs in the throttle to what the bike's actually doing in terms of delivering power to the ground. So I swapped out the bars quite early on. Stock bars have just way too much sweep for me, so I ended up going for something with like a 12-degree sweep angle. These are the Renthal RC High fat bars. Now, they're a little bit higher than I would usually go on, say, a motocross bike, where I want to get my rider triangle quite low. But given the fact that I'm riding standing up on the pegs for hours on end sometimes, I wanted something just a slight bit taller that would give me a little bit more comfort when riding off-road. With this bend, I can still crouch and get into that rider triangle easily, so it's a really good choice. What I've done is I've actually put the bars in the furthest back mounting position, and I have the risers facing forward, so it's the second setting from the back. I've then got the bars tilted back slightly, just to the point where I can feel that I've got really good input going into the handlebars from both a sitting and standing position. I swapped out the hand levers for some shorties. This is really great. It's kind of got a little bit more extension to them. I like to have my levers quite far out, and it just means that I can use the ends of the levers and I've got really nice feedback and pull on them. Helping with that lever pull, I've got the one finger clutch, which is just gonna help with that feel and that ease of pull on the clutch lever. On the rear, we swapped out the sprocket for something with an extra couple teeth. This is really just to help in the down low speeds and the low RPMs. I just feel the bike now has just a lot more pull down low. I quite like to ride it in the lower RPMs. I just find it to be a lot smoother. It really relaxes the chassis, helps the bike absorb the bumps far more efficiently. The bike's under less strain, and there's just so much more traction and so much more feel in the traction when using the throttle. The new 890 with that extra 100 cc's of displacement probably negates the need for this. However, I would have to ride one to be completely sure and see how they've done their gearing on that. Apart from that, everything else is really for a little bit of style and a little bit of crash protection. So we've got the Acerbis handguards, which are a wraparound handguard. They've been great. They've taken a lot of knocks and have had no issues with them. Double take mirrors, fold away nice and easily, really sturdy, love those. No vibration out on the highway too. The light grille gives it a meaner rally look, and it kind of takes away from that kind of praying mantis face that this bike has. On the side of the bike, lots of orange CNC coverings just to add a bit of bling, a little bit of protection to some of the key components. And then strapped on the back to do all my heavy lifting, I've got the Moscow Reckless 40 luggage system. So this is a rackless system. It just straps down onto the rear of the bike, and to be honest, this is an awesome piece of kit. Moscow, obviously known for doing really high-end gear. You do pay for it, but honestly, the quality is unrivaled by anything else I've seen. And that's comparing it to every other, major brand in this segment. I've seen it all, and I can honestly say that the Moscow stuff is heads and shoulders above the competition. Okay, so should you buy a KTM 790 or 890? Well, man, it's a tough call. Look, this bike is primarily made for off-road, let's be honest. It's more of a rally bike than it is an adventure bike. It really straddles those two categories. So be honest with yourself and the kind of riding that you want to do. If you really want to get out and just ride off-road as much as possible, then hell yeah, nothing's going to beat this bike. Let's just be completely honest in that realm. If you want to do more of a traditional adventure touring style ride, there are other bikes out there for you that I personally think are going to do a better job. If you're looking for a bike that is more well-balanced, previously I would have always recommended something like the Tiger 900, but Husqvarna have just launched their 901 Norden. You can see the specs in a video that I made about this bike in the description below. I'll leave a link there. The majority of adventure riders out there are going to be best suited to that bike, in my personal opinion. The 790 Adventure R, the 890 R, and even the Rally, if you want to go to that extreme, they're made for people who just want to spend as much time out in the dirt as possible, are going to be hitting some bigger technical terrain, harder hitting bumps, jumps, and anything that throws their way. Alrighty, so that's just my breakdown of this bike. It's so much fun. The engine, the electronics, the places it takes you, it honestly has just been a joy to own, and to tweak and build it out to fit my ergonomics, my riding style, my preferences has been a blast. And I just really love riding this bike, looking at this bike, and owning this bike in general. Let me know what you think to this bike in the comments below. What are you riding? Are you thinking about getting an adventure bike? Let me know, and I would love to help you out finding the perfect bike for you. As always, keep it safe. See you next time. Peace.